Barnsketter. Carter. Fitzwater. Gregory. May. McCreary. Mosley.
We have a quorum. This morning we're going to hear Senate Bill 186, and as I said a week ago, 618 has actually got all the components that 186 will have when I sub it here in the committee shortly, or when we vote it out. And it's my bill, so I'm going to present it, and Senator Henderson will take the chair. Thank you. Here's my coffee. Let me take that.
Senator Cierpiot, please begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This morning, I'm going to give a quick, brief rundown on this bill, and there'll be witnesses behind me that will give a lot more details about it. Senate Bill 186 has the first section is 393.135, commonly referred to as QUIP, Construction Work in Progress. Is an accounting tool that allows utilities to recover the cost of new construction projects like generation facilities while the project is still under construction. When this is allowed, it means utilities can start earning a return on investment in these projects before they are completed. This section will allow QUIP and rates for construction of any new gas generating units. It's also a carve out to 393.135, prohibits to the inclusion of QUIP and utility rates through the proposed IRP reform. And the reason this is really important and something we are pursuing is to incent utilities to deploy gas turbines, to take up the potential problem with, as we've got more and more green energy and reliability issues are starting to creep into parts of the state and parts of the country. This is an effect to try to incent companies to deploy more of these quick start gas turbines, which will help alleviate some of these peak load problems. 393.1080 is a state reliability mechanism, and due to the closure of coal plants and renewables being an unreliable resource at times, there's a need to ensure that Missouri has adequate and reliable resources available. This bill would require, or this part would require, documentation annually that outlines utilities' plan for the upcoming planning year as well as 3 subsequent years. It will need to be consistent with the SPP MISO adequacy requirements, and the PSC may determine prudency or order plans to resolve any issues. And the last part is 393.1900. That is what we're calling the Integrated Resource Planning, also known as the IRP. An integrated resource plan is a long-term plan written by utility to show how they plan to meet future energy demands. This section will reform Missouri's IRP process by 1-year contested IRP cases with the Commission. The Commission will issue an order after the 1-year process with consideration of resource adequacy, reliability, rate impacts, cost effectiveness, and resource diversity. This reform will include incentives for the utilities as well as penalties for deficiencies. And as I said, if you read the bill, it's a lot more detailed than that. I have some witnesses coming up that will explain it in more detail. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. We're going to go back and forth with those in favor and against, so any witness to testify in support, please. And please begin when you are ready.
Good morning. Good morning, Vice Chair Henderson and members of the committee. Thank you for having me this morning to present testimony on Senate Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 186. My name is Kayla Hahn, and I'm the chair of the Missouri Public Service Commission. The commission is charged with ensuring safe and adequate service at just and reasonable rates for our rate-regulated, investor-owned utilities. While we regulate water, sewer, gas, and electric, today I'll be focusing on electric. I'm here today because we need to take action to ensure our electric grid can meet demand and ensure our citizens and state benefit from the grid. We need to ensure that all homes, businesses... It is. Do I need to... Thank you. We need to ensure that all homes, businesses, and manufacturing plants can continue to have reliable power. We need to ensure that investment will help Missouri prosper and be competitive in the long term. And we want and need to be competitive with our neighbors. In these instances, we need to power Missouri and secure Missouri's energy future. This bill is collectively called Power Mo and is comprised of three primary components. One, as highlighted by Senator Cierpiot already, requiring our utilities to demonstrate that they can meet their demand through the creation of a state reliability mechanism. Two, reforming how we do utility resource planning to be meaningful. You've heard testimony previously about utility integrated resource plans, about how the utility does a significant amount of work to essentially be met with a check the box that they met our requirements. We need to do better utility resource planning that gives every stakeholder a seat at the table through a contested process, which we've created in this bill, that provides both incentives and consequences to the utility for taking certain actions. If the utility is deficient in their planning, they can correct it. And if they don't, then we can litigate a complaint case and assess penalties. If the utility does a good job in their planning, they'll get expedited treatment for future CCN requests and gain access to accounting treatment reform, or construction work in progress, also known as CWIP. And we need to unlock CWIP accounting treatment for new generation that goes through the new resource planning process and CWIP treatment for new gas generation. Reforming our accounting treatment can ensure that if we need to build additional generation, and we do, that it can be beneficial to ratepayers over the status quo. Our support for this bill, I think we've provided all of you a set of materials, but we'll have additional materials today. Michelle, do you have those? Great. From the materials, Missouri and nationally has been in a state of flat to declining load growth, but that's no longer the case. Electrification is changing everything, driven by onshoring and manufacturing in a post-COVID environment, data centers, AI, electrification of homes, devices, and everything else. In order to ensure a safe and reliable grid, last year Kansas passed a bill allowing CWIP for new gas generation. Since that time, Evergy has announced corresponding new gas generation to meet the needs of increasing load, including the needs of a $4 billion Panasonic battery plant that is anticipated to add 4,000 new jobs and over 16,000 construction jobs. The Evergy press release in your materials tells you everything you need to know about the impacts this bill can have on this state, because Kansas is certainly reaping the benefits of what they've passed. And our bill goes leaps and bounds further than theirs in ensuring customer protections. And where you site new generation matters. Borders matter. When you site generation in another state that's partly owned by Missouri customers, you subject our citizens and ratepayers to the policies of that state. And we know that some of our border states may not share our policy views, which makes it imperative that we need to incent the building of generation in Missouri. Now, you may hear that CWIP accounting treatment is bad for ratepayers, or that it shifts risk to ratepayers. So let me talk about the math. On building a hypothetical $1 billion gas plant, it saves ratepayers $86 million over the life of the asset. CWIP, when compared to the status quo accounting treatment, can lead to lower annual and monthly costs to the average customer. Lower when the plant is put into service with CWIP at $6.33 a month compared to $6.91 a month with the status quo. Or lower annual cost of $75.96 a year with CWIP compared to $82.92 a year with the status quo. In addition to being beneficial to ratepayers, it can also lead to less rate shock. As with CWIP, rates for building new plant can be phased in over time rather than put into rate base all at one time. Evidence of this is that under CWIP, rate recovery would start at $1.89 a month compared to $6.91 a month, which is a significant difference. Evidence of that is with Michelle. You might also hear that CWIP treatment shifts risks to ratepayers. In this bill, we've significantly mitigated that risk by saying if the plant never comes online or is over budget or not on time, the Commission can require ratepayer funds to be refunded with interest. And finally, CWIP will reduce the amount of PISA, which I know you all discussed yesterday, that may be used, and make the utilities less reliant on it. By phasing in rates through CWIP, less would need deferred and recovered under PISA. As PISA is proposed under Senate Bill 6, PISA costs recovered using QUIP would cost ratepayers $1.53 a year compared to $4.33 a year under the status quo accounting treatment, which is a savings of $2.77 a year. So the choice is clear. At every turn, QUIP benefits ratepayers. We need to add QUIP as a tool in the toolbox when we consider how to best pay for future generation assets. The status quo cannot continue. It's just not good enough. Now, I have a panel of experts behind me who can also help answer questions. I'll take the easy ones. And that does conclude my testimony. Happy to address questions from the committee.
Any questions from the committee? Yes, proceed, Senator.
You stated that this bill will protect ratepayers. How is it doing that?
By all the customer protection provisions that we have. So what QUIP accounting treatment, well, there's customer protections in every single provision. So in the state reliability mechanism, if the utility provides a demonstration that they cannot meet their load, then there are, basically it's all consequences to the utility. There's no incentives at all. The second provision, the integrated resource planning reform, there's consumer protections. What it does is it allows every single stakeholder a seat at the table, which includes public counsel, which does not exist currently. Public counsel represents the public. So, in addition, through that contested integrated resource planning case, if the commission orders or parties agree on a preferred integrated resource plan moving forward, when we go through that CCN process, we check every single component of that process, and we compare.
What is CCN?
Great question, sorry. It's called Certificate of Convenience and Necessity, but it's liken it to like a license to go build a future asset, like a permit, kind of. And then it can potentially unlock accounting treatment, and that accounting treatment we have customer protections like refunds with interest if the plant's not built.
And what consequences will the utility companies face?
A complaint case and penalties, financial penalties.
And what type of financial penalties would you put on them? Like,
It
would
depends
you
on
determine how much financial penalties you would give them?
It would depend on the damage to ratepayers.
I mean, do you have a scale or something that you all are going to use, or would you're just
No.
going to make up stuff every time
So,
it happens?
for example, in the reliability mechanism, if there's not enough generation and the utility has to buy from the market, the cost of the difference of buying from the market for fuel or for energy during that time could be a proxy for what we may assess or what we may not allow recovery on from ratepayers. So there's really no set dollar amount. It would depend on the amount of harm.
I think that's all I have for you.
Thank you, Senator.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody to testify in opposition?
Oh, Senator, we have someone for information, so if you would do in favor, opposed, then information, in favor, opposed, information, that would help a lot.
That'd be perfect.
Thank you.
Anybody in opposition? Seeing none. We have one? Okay. I thought we were going to get by. Come on down. And proceed when you're ready.
Good morning. My name is Tim Opitz on behalf of Midwest Energy Consumers Group. You heard me testify, seems like a long time ago, a week ago, about plant and service accounting. At the beginning of that, I neglected to share a little of my background. When I started working in the utilities area, I first started at the staff of the Missouri Public Service Commission as a lawyer. Then I eventually became Chief Deputy Counsel at the Office of Public Counsel. Then I was General Counsel at a renewable energy nonprofit for about 5 years. And for the last roughly 4 years, I've been representing large commercial industrial customers, primarily through the Midwest Energy Consumers Group, but also on an individual basis in different states and cases. And I say that just to say I've got a background with the Missouri Commission. I appreciate their function. I appreciate the good work that they do, but I disagree with some of their analysis as it relates to the QIP provisions within this bill. When there are savings, they talk about that $86 million. As we're looking at the way rate making is done, where the utility gets to build in a depreciation expense and a return on that investment, the customers aren't going to see that savings of breaking even for nearly 25 years. So the folks in my Midwest Energy Consumers Group Association would rather not pay up front for these speculative savings that may occur in 25 years. I don't know what the utility regulation will look like in 25 years. I don't know if customers will actually see this benefit. So that's our concern with the QIP portion. A couple issues I wanted to hit on quickly that I've heard from folks talking with senators and members of the House is, you know, the need for new load, and that's why we need this special accounting treatment. I would say with these provisions in these bills, first of all, if there is a need for new load, the utility has the obligation to move forward with planning for that and building that plant. I don't know of any additional CCNs going on. Ameren recently had a gas CCN called Castle Bluff, in which my group worked to accommodate a special accounting mechanism to financially make it better for them to build that plant. Evergy's got 2 gas plants that they're building in Kansas as a consequence of our rules. They've got those pending in Missouri as well. If we move forward with these IRP rules and this QIP accounting, it might actually extend the process. The Commission can speedily approve CCNs. Castle Bluff, the company, filed on June 7th, and the parties agreed to a stipulation October 17th. The final order was October 30th, so 145 days or 97 working days to approve a roughly $1 billion gas plant. A motivated commission, if it really needs to add load for utility, they can act even faster. In 2015, I worked on a case where Evergy filed a CCN, as you heard, application to build a gas plant or a plant. It was a small solar facility. That case was expedited. Live testimony was taken. They completed that case, issued the CCN in 71 working days. So if there's a need for power, the utilities can act, and the commission, if they're motivated, can act quickly and still do a full review. I mentioned on the idea that QIP is better for customers is flawed. Customers would rather not pay now for something that may not materialize. And then the last concept I've heard is if they don't have these special mechanisms, the utilities will have to buy from the market to serve their customer load at a price premium. And I would just say to the Senate, at the end of the day, the utilities have a built-in incentive to build things. They earn a return on the investments they make to serve customers. It's hard for me to accept that there's a disincentive to building when, under the current rate-making process, they have that opportunity to earn a return on their plant. But that said, if they need capacity, and I've looked at their resource planning, they are planning to add capacity. They should plan to add it. They should make the applications to add it. And, you know, to the extent they say, well, we'll just buy from the market, I think there would be a shareholder revolt if that happened, because that's how the shareholders make their money. The utility makes its money when it spends money, and it can earn a return on that money. So to the extent there's a threat or a potential consequence of buying from the market at a price premium, I think that would probably only be temporary until they add new generation. But at the pace of adding generation, I think there may be a stub period anyway. So with that, I would just say, you know, the QIP provisions in this bill are what MECG has the most concern about, because it would increase bills immediately and significantly when few can afford it. And I ask you to consider not including the quit provisions in here.
Questions for this witness? Senator McCreary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. So yesterday, when I was inquiring of the bill sponsor of this bill, but also Senate substitute for Senate Bill 4, we talked a little bit about Missouri. The average Missourian is carrying over $5,600 in credit card debt. Depending on who they've got their credit card through, I think the interest rate on that is, 20, 30%, if, on average. So talk me through, I think my constituents, if they're carrying an average of $5,600 in credit card debt, paying anywhere from 20 to 30% APR, that they would rather have more money in their pockets now than be spending money on something where they might not see, based on your testimony, like they won't even see the value of it until 25 years from now. So I think I'm trying to talk about a little bit about the value, the time value of money.
Senator, to respond to that, I would say I think that gets to the opportunity cost for customers in terms of an economic term, meaning that it's better for customers to have their money now
Right.
than it is for them to give it to the utility now in the hope of future savings. A few numbers that I had looked at, and this was just a lendingtree.com, but according to them, in Q3 2024, the average credit card debt in Missouri was over $6,000. According to the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, in November 2024, the average credit card interest was 21.47%. So that means the opportunity cost for many Missourians, from a residential perspective, would be that interest rate. If they're paying more to the utility, that's less money they have to spend down on that higher cost for them. From a business perspective, they're more often than not paying, more likely than not paying that high of a percentage on their debt. But if they're giving money to the utility for a future power plant, what are they forgoing? I'm not running these businesses, so I don't know, but it could be investing or modernizing their own plants. It could be expanding their operations in Missouri. It could be wage or salary increases. It could be dividends or profits. I mean, these companies who are in MECG are businesses and want to make money. There's countless ways a business or a customer can choose to spend their money. With QUIP, customers would be required to hand it over to the utility sooner. So,
And on average, what can a investor-owned utility borrow money? At what rate can they borrow money?
I don't have the answer to that, Senator.
Okay, I'm assuming it's single digits.
It would be lower than 21%.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Any further any further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Anybody to testify in support? Oh, excuse me, informational, you're correct. Please come forward. And proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Michelle Hadaway, and I'm the director for the Missouri Department of Economic Development. I just want to give some information on what we're seeing as far as trends go for project attraction into the state of Missouri. Kind of an overview of unemployment. So currently, Missouri's unemployment is 3.7%. The national average is 4.1%, something we're really proud of, but it also means we need to be extremely competitive whenever we're looking at attracting new businesses to the state of Missouri. Last year, Missouri added over 84,000 jobs, and then we're seeing a huge number of those jobs, particularly in manufacturing, which is great because Missouri's prime for manufacturing, not only with the existing businesses that we have, our workforce programs, but also, I would say, the grit of Missourians and being able to get stuff done, something we're extremely proud of. So as we look at, since 2020, Missouri is ranked 6th nationally and 1st in the Midwest in manufacturing job creation. Only 5 other states since 2020 have added more jobs than us in manufacturing. That's Texas, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and Utah. Again, something we are extremely proud of. We've seen a lot of this because of reshoring opportunities, but also as people realize because of COVID, we need to make sure supply chains are closer. So they're looking at manufacturing opportunities in Missouri as a prime because of our ideal location, our rail systems, highways, everything. I can go on and how we continue to sell Missouri. I can tell you from as we are attracting companies into the state, what they look for, and this is in your slide packets too that was provided, location, which again Missouri is prime for, infrastructure, which utilities is ranking up into are we able to provide the power needed for these large projects, workforce, soft infrastructure, and then business environment and quality of life. Currently, when manufacturers are making a decision on where they're going to locate, the first thing they look at is electric power capacity. The second thing is access to development or infrastructure, and then the third is talent. So if this was 2 years ago, I would have sat in front of you and I would have said, we don't have sites. We don't have the necessary sites or infrastructure in place around those sites, meaning water, sewer, roads, right? Ready to go to be able to track the projects. 2 years before that, I would have told you we don't have the workforce. We need to train our individuals and upskill our individuals. While all of those are still factors we are constantly trying to compete with within the state against other states, right now, we are currently losing projects because we cannot provide the power and the necessary time frame for the companies need. I remember in 2021, I worked a project personally where it was a large manufacturing opportunity, thousands of jobs, where they needed 5 megawatts of power. And at that time, we were all blown away, 5 megawatts of power. And again, this was in 2021, okay? We currently, and again, this is in your packet of information, have 3 projects since June that are asking for over 1 gigawatt of power. And to put that in perspective, that's enough power for 750,000 homes. So we have 3 projects that are asking for 1 gigawatt of power. And again, this is not an attack on the co-ops, the city-owned or private utilities around Missouri. We work very, very closely with all of those in order to make sure that Missouri is succeeding. We just are currently losing projects. And I have to get on a phone call next week to talk about a project that we can't provide power to. And we're going to lose it, and they're not going to continue to look at Missouri, thousands of jobs, because we can't provide the power in the time frame that's needed. I want to provide some quotes to you guys, and this is from the Site Selectors Guild. Now, in order to be into the Site Selectors Guild, you not only have to be a profession within site selectors, but you have to be asked to be in it. So this is not like a paid association. You have to be invited to be a part of it. What they are currently seeing, and this is a global issue, not just a Missouri issue, but globally, governments and utilities need to add or replace the equivalent of virtually all the world's power grids by 2040 to shore up reliability. Another one said, the strain on electric grids in the United States has intensified due to the U.S. investments in domestic manufacturing backed by the IIJA and IRA and the CHIPS and Science Act initiatives, which have resulted in construction spending of new manufacturing facilities more than doubling from 2022 to 2023 in such industries such as data centers, electric vehicles, battery plants, and semiconductors. So again, global issue, but in order for Missouri to continue to be competitive, we believe it's currently a race for resources. And for Missouri to be looked at and continue to be looked at to see if we even have the sites and have the workforce that's available, we need to make sure that we're able to provide the power. So again, more information in the packet, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Senator McCreary.
Good morning. I can appreciate where you're coming from, but maybe I'm kind of old school, but I want to stick up for the businesses that are already here.
Absolutely.
Some of them have been here for generations, and what I hear in your testimony is we're willing to not listen to the businesses that are sharing their concerns over things that are in other bills. And we're willing to like turn our backs on some of our biggest employers in the state and businesses that have been like institutions in our state in order just to possibly attract new business. And I would be interested in hearing your perspective on what your department is doing to help make sure the businesses in Missouri are being heard and that they are not being driven out of the state.
Absolutely. And let me be perfectly clear. This is informational on what we are seeing for attraction projects, right? So I'm just providing what our current pipeline is for attraction projects. Now, the majority of our work that we do at the department is to help existing businesses. That is how I came up with the department, is helping existing businesses, right? So as companies come to us for growth opportunities, right? If usually the power's there because you're not talking about a new facility coming online, you're adding a line, right? Or continuing to grow in small increments, right? So we're not seeing that influx of 1 gigawatts needed, right? For an existing company. But I would say, right, we have existing tools to help existing businesses, whether it is the workforce needs or upgrading power and upgrading water and sewer within rural communities, right? We have existing tools within our toolbox to help existing companies. I would say, too, depending on the industry, attraction and growth within Missouri helps all businesses. It raises all tides. If you're a retailer and all of a sudden a 3,000 new job company comes to your community, that's huge for opportunities for you as a retailer or an auto body dealership, right? So again, depending on the industry, all of the economy should be able to grow. So I'm not disagreeing that we need to continue to help existing businesses, and that's not what I'm not advocating that we ignore existing businesses, because that's something we strongly believe in continuing to help Missourians grow.
Well, and there's data out there, even data specific to Missouri, that shows for our existing businesses that as electricity rates rise, there is a subsequent job loss. So I just hope that everybody keeps that in mind, that there are already businesses here employing people, and that job loss, if we're not careful about what we're doing here, the industries that are most energy intensive will see job loss as rates go up.
And I also want to state, we know in economic development, less than 5% of new job growth for the entire state comes from attraction. So we know that existing businesses are the majority of that job growth.
Okay.
And that's where we focus. Absolutely.
All right, good. Well, then I'm going to keep focusing my energy on supporting the businesses that are already here.
Perfect.
So thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. So next we'll go to those testifying in support. And when you're ready, gentlemen, please begin.
Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Kevin Gunn. I'm representing Evergy. I'm their Vice President for State and Federal Regulatory Policy. I also happen to be a former member of the Public Service Commission as well as chair. I'll take each provision of the bill in a second, but I want to respond directly to Senator McCreary's point. The most reliable way to stabilize electricity rates in a state like Missouri is to add industrial and commercial load. So the more industrial and commercial load you add, you can spread out fixed costs to the system. Upgrades to the system are paid directly by those new businesses and those new loads, so they're not those upgrades are real system benefits to this. And so what a big portion of this bill is what they're trying to do, and what the Public Service is trying to do is allow that load to grow. And I will tell you that we're not talking speculative growth. We have enough growth that is being inquired about that we're not just expanding the pie, we're adding another pie. I mean, the amounts of electricity requirements and the size of these manufacturers that are coming in are enormous. I can give you an example in Kansas where the Panasonic EV plant added 4,000 jobs and located in DeSoto, Kansas, and that's an incredible boon. And you are not going to see substantial increase in rates in Kansas because when you talk about the kind of load, you're talking about literally tens of millions of dollars a month for electricity bills. That kind of revenue helps stabilize rates for everybody in existing programs. We also have demand response programs and energy efficiency programs that impact local business. But the single best way to stabilize rates, not just for now but for the long term, is to add the load. So I'll go into each provision. First of all, we're very supportive of the changes in the IRP process. Currently, the IRP process is kind of whatever you want it to be. If you like it, it becomes the Rosetta Stone. If you don't like it, it becomes merely a modeling exercises that you want to do. When there are deficiencies, We are asked to fix the deficiencies, but the PSC doesn't actually even approve the IRP. They merely accept it. And there are no consequences inside the IRP process for doing it. There may be rate case consequences. What this IRP process does is it takes all of the stakeholders and puts them in a room and has a year-long contested process so that we are deciding as a group, essentially, what of these large generation projects that we want to build. And within that, you also get cost estimates, and you understand what you're building these for, what the forecasts are to build for. And then the entire process really drives people towards coming to an agreement, towards a settlement. We've seen that in particularly Michigan, where this has been employed before. But the only thing that you're really expediting is decisional prudence. Decisional prudence essentially means is this a good idea at the time that you build, and that's the standard that the PSC looks at. So it's not in hindsight whether it was a good idea, it was whether this is a good idea at the time. So you are putting a marker down and saying, we all think this is a good idea at the time. All the stakeholders think this is a good idea at the time. You still go through a CCN process, and you still go through a rate case process. So there is not a single dollar of operational prudence that is decided through this. The Public Service Commission can still disallow costs through the rate case process if any of those, even if those agreed upon projects are not managed properly or if they overspent. And there are real consequences within the IRP process if we don't maintain reliability or if we don't complete that. So from just a purely planning process, it makes much more sense to have everybody involved at the beginning of this process before steel is put into the ground, before a project is built, rather than waiting until a project is built and everyone deciding whether there was a good idea or not and then pulling it out. And I personally think the involvement of staff and OPC and all of the businesses that can go through a contested case, have a voice at this, is incredibly important. And that works well with the other two aspects of the bill. So I think you have to take a look at these together, where the state reliability mechanism, what that's going to provide is information from the RTOs that we report to the RTOs. We'll give that to the commission. And there's a couple different ways to maintain reliability. You have watt for watt, which is in another one of the bills. It can work in companion or instead of the state reliability mechanism. But we know we have to be reliable, and so we believe we're building for reliability as well. And so any mechanism that would hold our feet to the fire to make sure that we're doing what we're saying is absolutely imperative. I want to be clear about QUIP. I know it's controversial. Mostly it's whether you call it CWIP or QUIP is one of the bigger fights that we have. I fall firmly in the QUIP camp, but Kansas is the CWIP camp. But this is not a unusual mechanism. Almost every other state has some form of QUIP in it. I absolutely understand why people are uncomfortable with it. One, this is limited to the financing piece. It's not the entire project cost. It's limited to the finance piece. Secondly, there are clawback provisions. There are consumer protections. If something doesn't get built, if you can adjust and claw back some of that money. Secondly, it still does not prevent the Public Service Commission during rate cases from saying that any of those dollars were spent imprudently, and it is all netted against other things that we are doing. So if it doesn't work in concert with one another, it's problematic. And you also now have, if you adopt the IRP process, you have a list of projects with cost estimates that everybody's agreed should be built. And so this is not about speculative building. This is not about gold plating the system. This is about having a set of projects that everybody thinks is a good idea in order to be able to attract economic development, as well as to make sure that there are consumer protections in there. So we're going to know what the costs are, and we're going to know if we're going above those costs, which will have consequences for what we're doing. They've passed this in Kansas. We're not only building in Kansas. We have a CCN also for a plant in Missouri, but those Kansas sites, because businesses want to locate in proximity to actual facilities because there are less transmission costs. They're typically near interconnects. The fact that if you can build a site in Missouri, then you have a better chance of attracting a companion business to that site, or an expansion to that site. And we want to build in Missouri. We want to use Missouri suppliers, even though we're kind of split throughout the jurisdictions. So this is I think a well thought out bill. That I do think there are consumer protections in there. There are real consequences for utilities for not performing, and I think that if you do look at the difference between the allowance for funds used in for construction, AFUDC versus QUIP, that because we can use AFUDC today, you'll see that this is actually a cost savings. Yes, some of it's over the long term, but there are actually even short-term savings as opposed to AFUDC. So this is a better way to approach it. And we happen to, it's the staff's analysis. It's not our analysis. If you look at the staff's analysis, and I would encourage you to have conversations with the staff because they go through these dollar by dollar and make sure that what we're doing it conforms with the law and good regulatory policy. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Before we go to questions, I just want to remind everybody, because I didn't earlier, make sure you fill out a witness form and make sure you turn that in when you come in, if you would, please. And with that, any questions for this witness? Seeing none.
Yeah.
Oh, proceed, Senator.
What short-term savings do you see? or
Well,
foresee?
because of the way that the AFUDC is booked versus the QUIP, I think you're going to see those savings immediately. AFUDC is allowance for funds used for construction. I always mess it up. Used during construction, not for construction. So it's AFUDC. The other short term issues is that because you have if you use it in concert with the IRP process, that there may be projects that we think are a good idea that the other stakeholders said, well, maybe you should delay those projects or hold off on those projects. You can stage them throughout the process in order to make sure that consumers are better protected. And so that planning process can stage these projects in order and rate impacts to customers is actually specifically put in this as to be a consideration when you're approving our IRP. So if we think that the rate impacts are too big and they want to push out a project past the time period that they're doing it and say, we think it's actually cheaper to go to the market or buy interim capacity or something else, all of that can be factored into that IRP process. And that could have that absolutely can have a short-term benefit as well.
So what would be a rate increase that's too big? What would you consider too big?
Look, this is always a struggle. I mean, we understand that rate increases impact people. When you're on the Public Service Commission, you hear the stories about what people are struggling with, and totally understand that. And I think that the fact is we have to maintain reliable power. We have to spread those out, and so I don't know that there's a number that says that is too big, because you have to take everything into account, and we are also talking about long-term reliability. We don't want blackouts. We don't want lights going out. All of that has economic consequences to everybody and causes a problem. We try to have things that mitigate those things, like MEA, which is the Missouri Energy Efficiency Investment Act, where we just went through our fourth cycle. Demand response for businesses to be able to reduce in those peak times in order to do that. We have bill assistance that we're trying to do. We contribute to community action agencies in order to do that. And I think that, yes, we have to balance that, because at some point you have to make sure that the way you are phasing this in still maintains affordability. And that's always the balance that we're trying to strike.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know where I live, if the wind blows too hard, the electricity goes out. And customers are already upset about that and having to pay what they're already paying. And like I said, the wind just has to blow too hard and the electricity's gone. So paying in advance for what you think could be a benefit to them, and they, I mean, we talk about people being on fixed income, but in my opinion, I'm on a fixed income because I'm not getting a pay increase either. And I know they said $17 a month is probably going to be how much is going to be, the increase is going to be, and that's very significant, especially for our seniors. And I know I get calls all the time from my seniors about how much things are costing for them and how they need help. And you all come here for help for you all, you know, utility companies, these billion-dollar companies, but who's helping them?
Completely understand. And I would say a couple things. One is that when I was on the Public Service Commission, and I don't know of any electrical rate case where the actual requested amount was what was decided. And there have been rate decreases, partially through the tax cuts. We have tried to control our rate increases. I think if you look from 2017 on, including our last rate case, which we settled, at least on the Evergy side, our increases, and I can provide you with.
I'll say Evergy is not where I live. It's Emory.
Understood. I can only speak for Evergy.
I can't say Evergy is the reason why our electricity goes out.
Understand, and I can only speak for us.
But I mean, my mom calls me almost every day about how high her bills are.
We have to serve everybody, and we have to serve reliability, right? We're not like Apple that can charge $1,000 for, or charge whatever they want, right? We are not allowed to do that. And I do want to clear something up. That we talk about ROE. The ROE is not guaranteed profit. It is an authorized ROE. It is a cap on what we can earn off of that equity. And so because we are a monopoly. We can't charge whatever we want for our product. We're limited. So and that can be affected by weather. It can be affected by interest rates. It can be affected if we don't control our own M costs. It will eat into that authorized return on equity. So we're not talking about guaranteed profit, and I think that's one of the things that's important to know. We have to build. We have to maintain those systems. We're very proud of our reliability. We deal with ice storms and all kinds, snowstorms and summer storms. We're very proud of our reliability. But all of that, when you're talking about the miles and miles of distribution lines and transformers and individual meters, we have to pay for that, and we have to get capital in order to make to make investments in those and make investments in power plants to help accommodate, as I said, the growing load. There are what's in our queue right now from the businesses that want to raise money will help stabilize those residential rates, because it's a cost of service model. We will be building and improving the system to serve these businesses. They will be responsible for direct upgrades, so those will not be spread around in costs. And the revenue that is derived from that load, that's derived from those businesses, will help stabilize everyone's rates because of the ability then to take that revenue and reinvest it into the system. So as I said, the best way that I can say that can help stabilize residential rates is to grow other load. We saw it during the air conditioning era in the 70s. Companies were not coming in for rate cases for decades because the revenue sustained that model. Now, I don't know that we're ever going to get back to that, but that's what helps mitigate and help stabilize those rates and from the long term.
Okay, I want to hear another opposition before I have to leave. So.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Anybody to speak in opposition? And one thing I'm going to ask for the committee maybe a little bit, we're throwing in a lot of acronyms, so occasionally maybe you want to slow down and kind of tell us what some of those acronyms are. That might help a little bit, because I think it would help me at least a little bit if we got some of the acronyms given to us. Thank you. And proceed when you're ready.
Need to get a form here. Came from the House. John Kaufman on behalf of the Consumers Council of Missouri. I want to first I just briefly address the construction work in progress part of the bill, which I think is already you've heard a lot of the arguments. But I wanted, first of all, I think you have to address the fact that this would essentially overturn the ban on QIP, which was passed by the voters by a very wide margin. And I think that if you go down this path, you really should respect the voters and ask them if they've changed their mind, if you want to go down this path. I agree with, I think everything that I heard Tim Opitz say on behalf of Walmart as to the time value of money component of the calculation, which I don't think has really been appreciated. I also believe that projects under construction work in progress have higher cost overruns than projects without construction work in progress. And so that's another way in which I think it tends to drive costs up. And, of course, my concern is with residential customers and particularly vulnerable customers, senior citizens. There could be provisions that you consider that would exempt certain people. Maybe based on age, just under the intergeneration, to address the intergenerational inequity, the fact that this would require people to pay for power plants that are not yet serving them. And, as I understand it, the regulation at the Public Service Commission is supposed to emulate an actual business, not exactly, but it's supposed to emulate the pressures of a competitive system, even though we're dealing with a monopoly. And the way that works best is when the utility has more risk and they're putting their own money at stake. And but ideally, customers only want to pay for the cost of providing them service. They don't want to pay for power plants that have been shut down, and they don't want to pay for power plants that are not yet serving them. They want to just pay for the cost of service at this point, and they want the utility to bear some of the risk. They don't want to have to bear all the risk. One other just kind of technical note too, as to the, it was mentioned that this is financing, that we're only talking about financing cost during the construction work period. Well, that does include profit, includes debt and corporate profit. But seeing as the utility had not yet proven it, I think it would be fair to also to kind of break that apart, maybe consider construction work in progress just for the debt, but not the return on equity. Just another thing to consider. Now, here's the main thing I want you to, and I'm just going to shift to kind of the integrated resource planning process, and I commend Chair Hahn and the Commission for looking at this. I think that it's coming from a very sincere place and concern about the public interest, and I'll say that since Chair Hahn has been in charge, I think she has brought a rigor and discipline to the Commission that is good, and I think that she's a very quick study, and I appreciate her efforts, even though I have some disagreements on policy. And I would just say this as to the integrated resource plan. It is currently not binding, and that's for a reason. And it may be hard to understand, but pre-approval carries with it certain risk, or rather, the risk is shifted to the consumer when you're pre-approval. And we've come up with this concept that I think was mentioned by Mr. Gunn, and I think this is kind of a peculiar to Missouri, but we've bifurcated prudence. We have this idea of decisional prudence, which is the decision to start the power plant, and then you have the prudence that is after the fact and looking at the costs of the cost overruns and how the project was managed. And maybe I'm a curmudgeon, maybe I'm a little bit overly cynical simply because of my experience, where I am often called into situations where things have gone very wrong. So I usually see utility rate issues after there's been a real problem, and people are scrambling for ways to fix the problem. And usually you don't see public service commissioners saying, well, gosh, I wish we had given the utility more money. I wish we found a way to give them money quicker and get them extra money. Instead, they're looking to find me a law that can help me protect the public in this situation. And invariably, I'm in a legal dispute with the utility, and what the utility's position is, well, we already, this project's already pre-approved. You can't, and that's what happened in South Carolina with the Base Load Review Act. They said, well, these QIP charges have been approved all along, so you've approved the power plant. You can't take that money away from us now. And so I would just say that your effort should be really focused on what happens on the back end, because that's when everything is controversial and everyone is really looking at the law carefully. And make sure that you don't bind the commission's ability to really scrutinize those costs on the back end. And you don't give the utility an argument to just say, you've already approved it, and we can't look at it, because the public is going to be demanding an answer at that point. That's my perspective. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Anybody, and remember to fill out your forms, and anybody to testify for informational purposes only. And please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ray McCarty, President of Associated Industries of Missouri, and wanting to speak on one piece, the QUIP piece. We haven't seen the language, so we're not sure. Chair Hahn did say that the language provided for refunds for cost overruns and if the project were never built. Assuming that's the case, we would not oppose the bill, but we do believe that consumer protection is very important and should only be overridden if those refund provisions with interest are included. We provided language to the chair to do that. So happy to answer any questions. That's our position at this time, neither for nor against.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next, anybody to testify in support?
Mr. Chairman, committee, my name is Randy Imager. I apologize for the allergies and the laryngitis this morning, but I just had, we do support the legislation. We appreciate it very much and what the Public Service Commission does and has done with this. We would like to mention one issue that we feel is somewhat of a concern to us. Over the years, the utilities have used proposed and anticipated environmental regulations in putting forth their integrated resource plan. One of these has been a carbon tax, which weighs against, as you can imagine, any fossil fuels, but primarily against a coal plant. So we've seen in a number of states and as well as Missouri that the utilities have put a anticipated carbon tax on coal-fueled electricity, which increases the cost artificially. Congress has never passed a carbon tax. We have had different administrations and EPAs propose that. We've had the U.S. Supreme Court knock them down. We would just recommend that at least some of the scenarios going forward and looking at what to build and the cost of different types of generation include a zero cost for carbon on those, as there's currently not a situation where there's a carbon tax in place. With that, I'll open it up to questions.
Does the other committee member have a question? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody to testify in opposition?
Yeah, that's right. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Jay Hardenbrook. I'm the Advocacy Director for AARP here in the state of Missouri. We continue to be opposed to the construction work in progress. I do think the argument over how you pronounce it is pretty funny. I was just over in the House Utilities Committee, and everybody kept saying CWIP, and sounds like a fancy smoothie to me that I probably wouldn't buy. But yeah, QUIP continues to be, and you know, going off of what Mr. McCarty just said, like there have to be all sorts of restrictions, consumer protections built into any QUIP project, and that's because by its very nature, it encourages fiscal irresponsibility. When you get to take your risk and put it onto your ratepayers, it is naturally going to lead to more cost overruns, and that's why you need these clawback provisions. Now, the one thing that worries me as someone who represents the 50-plus population is the people who are most likely to get hurt by these cost increases over the construction work in progress during that construction phase are also the people that are least likely to get that clawback, right? Low-income people move a lot, probably maybe even move out of the service area. They still had to pay. There's probably no way that the PSC is ever going to find that person to give them their refund back, right? We have members that will pass away, especially if you build a large nuclear power plant. that could be a 20, 30-year project, right? We will definitely have people who will never be able to get that money back, and will also never see the benefits of that extra power. So by its very nature, we think that QIP is a bad idea. And if you're going to use that, we would encourage you to put some very, very strict consumer protections on that, and preferably just not do it at all. Utility companies can borrow money at incredibly low rates. There is really no reason why they need that upfront money from your constituents in order to make these projects work. Happy to answer any questions of the member.
Something you said was a little bit alarming, and it was the fact that you represent 50 plus.
Yep.
Is that what?
Yeah.
And
50 plus.
when you said that, I'm over 50, so that's a little alarming. I just want to say I never saw myself in that category. So out of everything I've heard yet, that's the most alarming. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. We're here for you.
I'm also alarmed, but at this stage, I don't think we have any other questions, so thank you
All right.
very much.
Thank you so much.
Informational, I think we're out of those. No more information, so those in support.
Chairman, committee members, thank you for this opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 186. My name is Warren Wood. I'm Ameren, Missouri's Legislative Regulatory Vice President. I won't repeat some of the issues already addressed by previous witnesses on the economic development opportunities we have in front of us. I would highlight some of Mr. Gunn's testimony. I thought he did a great job talking about the Integrated Resource Plan, opportunities for efficiency in this. I would note that what we're doing at the Commission is in this IRP process is moving up the decisional prudence aspect. It does nothing to reduce any risk on the utilities on execution prudence. If we're not good at building the project for a good price, there's every opportunity for the Commission to do something about that. And finally, in terms of construction work in progress, looking at what's in this integrated resource planning process, it's very different than the protections that were not in some of the other states where they talk about bad things that have happened there. There's limitations on the timeline of it, the amount to be recovered based on estimated budgets up front, and I understand there'll be a clawback in there put in about if a plant doesn't go into service. So, and those deal with many of the risks that have been talked about, and I thank the Commission for the leadership to work on this through stakeholders in the months previous. Thank you.
Okay, and I don't think I have any questions, so
Thank you.
We'll take anybody in opposition, please.
Good morning, Chair Henderson and committee. My name's Michael Berg, and I'm here representing the Missouri Sierra Club. The Missouri Sierra Club opposes Senate Bill 186. Want to reiterate what was said by Mr. Kaufman and others. The people of Missouri voted to oppose QIP, and this would put it, pending approval by the unelected Public Service Commission. And we think the consumer should be protected and there should not be a QIP. We also oppose the section about the change of the IRP. Right now there's a 3-year cycle. This would contemplates a 4-year cycle without the annual updates. We see that the process would be insufficient, woefully insufficient. It should inform our regulators about all plausible resource options and provide opportunities for meaningful input. This change would not leave the opportunity for the public to meaningfully weigh into the process, leaving it more secret, opaque, and undemocratic. It should include opportunities for contested public hearings, robust stakeholder engagement, and a public comment period. Utilities decisions about long-term planning have major impacts on the public, and the public's voices should be heard. We also see it's lacking a lot of other critical details, and it only addresses electric corporation, which favors only the major investor-owned utilities. So as written, the bill does not include any supply and demand-side options, nor information about costs, risks, reliability, industry trends, cost-benefit analysis of the economic, health, environmental effects on ratepayers or state and energy host communities. All of this relevant information should be deserve to be presented. And finally, we are alarmed that the bill seems to fast track the certificate of convenience and necessity process, and it's imperative for ratepayers that any proposed project go through the full and established permitting process before any approval is granted.
Well, thank you very much for your testimony. And so how many more do we have in favor? Anybody else in support? Come on forward. And please make sure you fill out your forms.
Mr. Chair, Jared Hankinson with the Missouri Chamber of Commerce here to testify in support. Will not belabor the points that have been made. We view any asset that ensures the reliability and resiliency of Missouri's grid as any essential economic development tool for existing businesses in Missouri and future businesses that want to operate in the state. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Anybody else in opposition?
Chair, members of the committee. I'll be quick. My name is James Owen. I'm the Executive Director of Renew Missouri, a clean energy advocacy group. I'm not here today to testify as to the pre-approval of the integrated resource planning process. We actually see that there could be benefits to interveners like ourselves being a part of that process. We just simply want to reiterate our concerns that we addressed at the hearing last week in regards to the gas PISA or PISA bill. Again, that's another question about how you pronounce that. And, addressing the issue of if there's a component that is going to be favoring natural gas, that this should be more generation neutral. And if you're going to institute QIP, it should be in line with what I've heard a lot in this building of having an all-of-the-above approach to energy policy and being able to address those forms of generation as well. And with that, I cede the floor.
Well, thank you very much. Anybody else that will be here to testify in support? Seeing none. Any more in opposition? Yes. Come on forward, please.
Good morning. My name is Diana Plasha. I represent the Missouri Industrial Energy Consumers, which is a group of some of Missouri's largest employers. And we just want to speak our opposition today because of all the bills that we've opposed in committee. The biggest rate increases we believe would come from QIP. QIP has been a disastrous policy in other states. We're talking about billions of dollars in cost overruns that have saddled the economies of some states. And whether it's a nuclear plant or whether it's gas generation, you take away the incentive for the utility to control costs. We have a surrogate for competition with the Public Service Commission. The series of legislation that have been introduced, and it's our job to explain, the problems that we see. We know they're well-intentioned. However, what they're doing is tying the hands of the commission and making it very difficult for the commission to have any ability to control rates. These are complicated accounting mechanisms, and it isn't obvious from the face of the bill, but that's what they would do. There are over 280,000 manufacturing jobs in Missouri. There are about 7,800 utility sector jobs, and that's the latest information I have from State of Missouri statistics. If you look at what drives the economy, it's manufacturing jobs. For every manufacturing job, you have 4 to 5 additional jobs in the service industry. The utilities exist. First of all, they're providing an essential service, but they exist to provide a service to Missourians, to residents, and to industry. What happens in some states, and has happened in quite a number, and I can provide that data, is what they call a utility rate increase death spiral. What it is price-sensitive customers use less energy or potentially leave the state, and the residents are left picking up the tab because they can't. And what happens is they have less money to spend, they struggle, and they have to bear all the weight of plants that are billions of dollars and last for 50 years. And so it can really be a drain on the economy. It's happened in other states. All this utility rate increase legislation, if you add it up, you could turn out to have rates go up by 60% or more as a result of this. It's just a question of how much they want to spend. So what we'd like to see is for more consideration to be placed on this. And if you're going to take away all the risk of the utilities, there is a customer choice bill. There should be a safety valve for customers who feel they can't bear those rates and put some discipline on the utility spending by letting customers have the option to have choice of supplier. Many states have that, and there are ways to craft it that would be beneficial to all, not just for industrials, but for all customers. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. We've already done in support anybody else in opposition, so I think we have covered everybody. Senator, you have anything to close? Then I'm probably going to need you to come up here so we can end the meeting. So at this time, I make a motion that we close the meeting on commerce. Do I have a second? And we're adjourned.